just like that, Luke Moore, there were two. No more English sides left in the Champions League. Don't worry, though. The Europa Conference League, that's in the bag. And the Europa League will be ours as well. That's how I see it. But sorry for the bollocks. Yes, Paris Saint-Germain are through to the Champions League final. Arsenal are out. They beat them 2-1 on the night, 3-1 on aggregate. I don't think I don't think too many people will argue that the better team ultimately went through. It was a very keenly contested game, Luke Moore.
Yeah. I mean, there will be a handful of Arsenal fans that we all know who they are who will argue differently. But, I mean, in terms of the mainstream of public opinion, I'm with you. It was an interesting game. I think Arsenal made a good start. And to be fair to Arsenal, throughout the game till it really started to peter out, they were dangerous. Mm-hmm. You know, they were dangerous from the start. You know, there's a chance early on where Declan Rice has that header, it goes just the wrong side of the post, and it's encouraging not just because he got on the end of a header, but just that he was that far forward already, which is what we were hoping would happen from Arsenal's point of view. Hoping that Partey would go there to free him up to do that, and that kind of started everything quite well for Arsenal. Another big chance straight after that from Martinelli. Donnarumma makes a good save. And then the save after that from Martin Ødegaard's shot was just breathtakingly good. I mean, I mean the one the one I mean where Ødegaard couldn't have struck it better. He hits it like an absolute howitzer, and not only does Donnarumma see it late, but he gets down quick and he puts a really, really strong arm. Honestly, I could not believe he'd saved that.
So convincingly saved it. I know that's perhaps an odd turn of phrase, but you know, if it's a tip past the post or it's a
no, it's
just
a strong save,
even if he'd have tipped it just past the post, he was at full stretch and he just, you know, he just saved it by a whisker. That would be impressive enough. But as you say, he saved it and then some.
Yeah, and I think the best saves aren't the ones that look good in slow motion on the replays, you know, the ones for the cameras, the Kodak moments, as we used to say back in the day. But the best saves are the ones where you are instinctively like, how has he saved that? And that was one of those. And I think that kind of, I don't know if it broke Arsenal's hearts, but you said to me at the time, 15 minutes or so in, you know, Arsenal have to make this count, and I agreed with you at the time. And looking back on it, it was super important that they did, and they didn't do that. And part of the reason they didn't do that was because Donnarumma was just the last line of defence and was so effective. And you know, PSG are always going to be dangerous, right? Not long after that, Kvaratskhelia hits the post with a lovely one, and it's just a little reminder, isn't it? Little warning shot across the bow. We're still here. We'll pounce on anything. And they kind of did that. It felt to me, in summary, that Arsenal were, you know, just not massively short, but a little bit short of where it really counted when they really needed to do it. And the greatest metaphor for that was just the decline in length of Thomas Partey's long throws over the course of the game. Like, they started out being absolute bombs and causing real problems. By the end of the game, he's barely getting him into the penalty area. He's knackered. And that kind of summed it up,
I think Tony Pulis was watching somewhere going, oh, hello. I get on board with this. Yes, Arsenal, you're learning from it. And at the end, he's like, I knew you didn't have it in you. What are you up to?
Someone should have told Thomas Partey that Tony Pulis was watching. Might have seen him get a few more yards on those throws.
Possibly. We can only speculate at this point.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think the thing, you know, when the game starts, you say Arsenal right on top, and they were at it tonight. But unfortunately for them, they're playing quite possibly the best team in the tournament. I think a lot of people, we'll see what happens in the final, but I think a lot of people would have them down as that. They've won over so many people, lot of admirers. PSG have this team because of what they've done in the knockouts of this competition. Because you have to remember, they finished 15th in the initial league stage, which is enough to get through to that playoff round where they hammered their fellow French side, Brest, wasn't it? But they've turned it. They've convinced. Although they still do look a little bit vulnerable from time to time, but you manage to kind of create a chance or a shooting opportunity. You've got to beat the end of level baddie or the end of game baddie, which is Donnarumma, which you've already mentioned. But you've got to give Arsenal a bit of credit because they, as I say, they were very competitive. But I don't want to stick the boot in too much because I think Arsenal you might say they've overachieved a little bit in this Champions League, reaching a semi-final and then being, you could say, narrowly beaten, although I don't think PSG were...
That is a pretty solid professional job by PSG.
Yeah. I mean, Saka sticks that chance away and makes it... But you ultimately grasping at straws, right? It wasn't as close as, say, Inter Barcelona was, which was nip and tuck, last night. So, yeah, with Arsenal, I mean, I think it was during the first half of the match, towards the end of the first half, our acquaintance, dare I say friend, he may not see it like that though, Miguel Delaney tweeted, I think Arsenal have generally been good, but it's basically the season in microcosm. Some clever approaches and ideas, missing that forward, missing key players, still missing that something. Still not over, but it feels like they have too much to do with too little. And I, whether you think that's a touch harsh or not, it's ultimately kind of correct. Yeah, well, DJ, yeah. I'm not saying I agree. No, I clearly, that struck a chord with me, because with Arsenal, perhaps we'll look at the bigger picture of Arsenal in a little bit, but it did feel like that. But give them credit for what they've done in this competition and this game. But PSG, they are the side, I think, that a lot of people have really enjoyed in this competition, particularly the knockouts. They're so dangerous, as you say, Luke. They've got quality all over the pitch. They run their socks off, etc., etc. And that fan base as well. It's a tough place to go. When the penalty was missed, when David Raya brilliantly saves the penalty, he wasn't psyched out at all by Vitinha, the atmosphere in the ground didn't really change. It changed a little bit when Saka scored, where I think they thought, okay, let's just make sure, we're all right. But the fans have been in great voice the whole time. I think, they've had their detractors, PSG, and we'd certainly find it amusing if they failed to win this competition because of the ownership and all that kind of stuff. But for the players, the fans, and the manager, there's great cohesion, there's great spirit among them. I mean, you said last night, have Inter got all the way to the final on vibes? Well, you'd say with PSG, a bit like Inter as well, on quality and vibes, they've marched their way to the final.
Yeah. There's a lot to unpack there. I think on the Arsenal side, I agree broadly. I think it felt to me like the final ball was just missing and it wasn't quite clicking. And maybe if they, to go back to the point, if they'd scored early, just started, because they started well, maybe everyone relaxes a bit, says, look, we're back in the tie now, it's all square, we can reset and we can see what we can do and see if the pressure builds on PSG with that vociferous home support that, if it starts to get twitchy, can go the other way. It can go the other way at any stadium because, obviously fans don't like to see things going against them. But that didn't happen. And I think, it depends which way you look at it. Arsenal are going to probably come second in the league now. They might not. They might finish third, perhaps. Either way, they'll be back in the Champions League next season. And it depends how you look at it, because it depends how satisfied you are with coming second in the league and getting to the semi-final of the Champions League and being, really, as harsh as it sounds, a bridesmaid because you're not picking up trophies, right? And maybe you see it as part of a process under Arteta and it will continue to improve, but maybe it won't. So I think you'd have to be a pretty delusional Arsenal fan to, at the start of the season, not be happy with being in a Champions League semi-final right up until 20 minutes from the end of the second leg, when Hakimi scores that second goal and the game's basically over. That's a pretty good return from what Arsenal would have been expecting at the start of the season. The league is probably going to be a bit of disappointment there because City dropped off badly, and that's the only team that have been better than Arsenal in the last couple of seasons. But that's going to slightly separate point away from this game. On the PSG side, I do think they've improved massively in the second half of this Champions League campaign, and they've got weapons all over the pitch. They share the goals around. They don't get disheartened when they have 15, 20 minutes where they're not the best team. They seem to be able to kind of raise themselves, and they've always got someone who can pull something out of the bag. They're really, ultimately, on the evidence of what we've seen, they're just a better team than Arsenal, and there's no shame in that. I don't think they're massively better, but they are better when taking into account things like Arsenal's lack of availability of certain key players, Arsenal's perhaps slight lack of quality off the bench and maybe not having one or two players that could really make a massive difference to them in these huge games. But those players are hard to find. Those players cost a lot of money. And so, it's not as easy as that sometimes. This PSG thing, if they win it this year, will be, what will it be? It'll be an accumulation of like a massive project that's had a lot of stop and starting, had a lot of missteps in their quest to win this Champions League that may well have come together under Luis Enrique finally, because they've got that blend right and they've got that work rate there, and they've got rid of kind of superstars who occasionally feel like they're bigger than the team. They've got a team that works really hard for themselves. This has been a PSG project that's gone for a long old time, and it's been funded like in a massive, massive way. So there's no shame in what Arsenal have achieved in Europe this season. I think they've done really well. But overall, it was a dollar shot, and that's just how it goes sometimes. I do think they were particularly hard done by on the penalty, even though PSG missed it, chiefly because I think it was a decision that came from nowhere and it kind of killed the momentum. And you can understand why that's the case. And what I mean by that is, despite the fact that Vitinha has the penalty saved and does, the penalty run up of a fucking idiot, and it comes back to bite him, which I personally thought was quite funny. The penalty decision is a very strange one because Hakimi doesn't appeal for it. It's fired at Miles Lewis-Skelly from about 3 yards away, who tries to take his hand out the way, who's got his back turned, and the referee takes it upon himself with the assistance of the VAR official to just, from nowhere, just award a penalty that no one even asked for. And to me, that's a poor use of the system that they've got to officiate the games at the moment, and I didn't like to see it. I'm a little bit relieved that they didn't score it, but I still think it hurt Arsenal, actually.
I agree. I wouldn't have given a penalty. I suppose some people would immediately say, well, it shouldn't be down to whether people appeal or not, or all that kind of thing. I suppose what you're saying is that
why are you giving it?
Yeah. Look, we could go around in circles about this. We're talking about a decision which was given by the referee looking at the screen. I didn't think it was a penalty. I was glad it was saved, but ultimately it didn't change anything at all, of course.
I think it philosophically, without getting too kind of broadsheet about it, without getting too kind of Henry Winter.
Leave Henry out of this.
I think it changed. I just said, without getting a bit too Henry Winter, I'm leaving Henry out of it. I'm leaving him right out of it. I'm not criticising Henry. I'm just saying that I feel like there is an element of deflation about it when you get a penalty like that awarded against you, even though it's not scored. I just do. I think the time of the game it came and when it happened is an absolutely crucial time in the game. And so I don't see how you can't say it hasn't had an effect. It's obviously not had anywhere near as big an effect as it would have done if PSG had scored it and the game would have effectively been over. But nonetheless, it is still frustrating.
Yeah, we'll all agree. Were you more frustrated by that, or when Saka missed that chance to make it 2-2 on the night?
Yeah, so he scores a goal. What was interesting is they bounced back straight away as soon as Hakimi scores, right? A couple of minutes later, Saka scores. And you think, okay, great.
It's showing a bit of character. Arsenal have been criticised for that.
Yeah, it was. And I would have loved to have seen, maybe he's just not quite able to do it on the night or whatever, but I would have loved to have seen Saka, really commit the fullback. I know the fullback ends up getting subbed off anyway, but I'd love to have seen him committing more, and I think he really did have his number. And I actually thought as well, by the way, just before I answer your point about the Saka second chance, if Arsenal had a genuine centre forward that could have occupied Marquinhos and Pacho, I think it would have been more interesting as well, because I think as soon as Marquinhos comes up against a bit of physicality in that moment when Saka scores, he defends in quite an embarrassing way. He defends in a way that a centre-back should never defend. Like, you should, as far as I'm concerned, if you're a centre-half, you've got a role to play, a very specific role, and you can never be in a situation where you go down easily and hoping the referee bails you out, particularly against someone who's not a massively strong, bullying player. I thought he deserved everything he got, Marquinhos, there. Marquinhos wears that goal that Arsenal scored, and so he should. I mean, it's not mattered in the grand scheme of things, but I thought that would have been more interesting. But on the Saka chance, yeah, look, it looks a bad one. It looks particularly bad from behind the goal in slow motion. But what I would say is it comes at him quick. Donnarumma is gigantic, throws his whole body weight towards trying to get the ball. You've got to be pretty brave to not have that affect you in some kind of way. And I think he did quite well to get it as close to being on target as he could. I don't think it was as bad a miss as people have
I think.
To. I don't know what you thought about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say so. And even if it goes in, there's still a goal behind. I think you just want it to go in. I think because of this PSG side,
because of what you've enjoyed the night
exactly,
before.
Yeah. But also as well, I forgive me for stating this again. I want the English side to go through, and I really want.
I need to find time to take the piss out of you for that at some point. I don't know, it probably won't be tonight, but at some point I want to.
Fine.
I'll put a pin in it for now.
Yeah, I look forward to when Southampton are in Europe, but that
could be like, listen, mate, don't hold your breath for that.
It could be long gone before that happens.
The only chance they're getting to do that is if a few of them go on a Jet 2 package holiday, mate. That's the only chance they're getting to do it.
Bring back the Anglo-Italian Cup is all I would say.
That was Pompey's territory, and you know it.
Well, yes. But with Saka missed chance, I think you've summed it up well. I would say that, again, it's very easy to say when you're sat at home on your sofa. There was a couple of times where I thought, go on, Saka, take him on, do that. But then they exerted so much energy. I want
to commit people more.
Yeah, and actually the fullback, there were times that Saka did that. But perhaps maybe the reason why Saka didn't do that is because he felt that if he tries to play the ball across, which he did in the first half, actually, he did play some lovely balls across the face of the box. They didn't have the forward to put it in.
Totally, and that's an extension of the point I'm making about them.
Yeah. But this is the thing about Arsenal. You're in a Champions League semi-final. Your centre forward is a guy who hadn't played that position up until a handful of months earlier. I agree with you in that Arsenal have given PSG a bit of a game, a reasonable go, but they're out in the semi-final of the Champions League. Yes, they've had injuries, of course. I understand if Kai Havertz is in there and Gabriel Jesus, it's a bit of a different story. I mean, Mikel Arteta said that he wishes he could have brought Gabriel Jesus back to life after his injury earlier this season. And
said done at Easter.
Well, indeed. I don't know if Arteta is trying to do a pun there or not, but he's certainly gone in that kind of territory. But so I get Arsenal a few injuries, but I just grasping at straws. This is the thing. Like with Arsenal, you know which areas they need to strengthen in, and yet the club never seem to be aware of the areas they need to strengthen in. And we've known this since about 2006. It's the same conversation with Arsenal. Oh, defensive midfielder. They need a defensive midfielder. Well, by the time they get the defensive midfielder, it's kind of like, oh, well done, but now you need to patch a big old hole up front. Or now you need to do that. It'll take them 5 or 10 years to do that. And then by the time they do that, they'll need the defensive midfielder again.
That's what I mean when I say, that's what I mean when I say it's a dollar short, right? And I think you can apply that to different parts of Arsenal as an operation. But I think, you're talking about Saka playing great balls across the box and looking lively and the rest of it. The first 15 or so minutes, Arsenal were the better side. They hit PSG early. They managed to deal with the atmosphere that PSG fans generated.
And we give them credit for that.
But they couldn't make it happen. And part of the reason they couldn't make it happen is because of Donnarumma, and part of it is because of perhaps a slight lack of quality going forward in that goal scoring position. But then, having said that, Donnarumma makes saves that is bordering on saves that I've not seen a keeper make before. He's that good at saving shots. Yeah, and you don't know. I mean, for all we know, who cares whether it's Kai Havertz smashing it as hard as he can with a perfect technique or Martin Odegaard? Who cares whether it's Kai Havertz on the end of a header that goes just the wrong side of the post and Declan Rice rather than Declan Rice? I mean, it's a fine margin situation, right? And they've come up short. And there's probably quite a few reasons for that. But in the Champions League context, I don't think they can have too many regrets. I think the regrets they'll have, and maybe we'll discuss this in more detail at the end of the season itself, but really everything they're going for is gone now anyway, so you can just about do it now. The regrets they'll probably have are things like, losing at home to West Ham in the league in February at a key time, following that up with a draw against Nottingham Forest, not being able to get past them, then following that up in the league by not winning against Man United. Those types of key moments where even when Liverpool slip up, Arsenal don't take advantage is probably the best summary of what you're talking about there. Yeah. But overall, in the Champions League, they gave a good account of themselves tonight. I didn't think they were bad by any means. I just thought it was a little bit short.